Chapter 1. The legend begins. Wolves, twins, and destiny. You stand in a wild land untouched by time. No roads, no names. Just wind rustling through ancient oak trees and the moon hanging high above the Tiber River. There is no Rome, no glory, no empire, and not yet. But all that is about to change. In the distance you hear crying, faint and helpless. You follow the sound and find two newborns, abandoned in a basket, drifting in the river. No one to guard them, no humans nearby. But then, something emerges from the darkness. A she-wolf. You step back, fearing the worst. But no, she does not attack. She licks their faces. She nurses them. And in that moment, fate is sealed. Romulus and Remus, children who were never meant to survive, live. Not because of humans, but because nature itself decided they must. Years pass. You watch the twins grow, fierce and strong. They are not just boys. They are creatures of two worlds, born of a mortal princess, fathered by the god of war, Mars. Royal blood, divine blood, and the blood of wolves. When they come of age, the twins decide to build a city. But who will lead it? Who will name it? You're there when the brothers argue. And when arguing turns to rage, to violence, you see it. Remus falls, killed by his own brother. Romulus stands above the body, silent, unshaken. Then he begins. Say to build. On one of 7 hills, Palatine Hill, he lays the first stones. He names it after himself, Roma. The new city begins not with peace, but with blood and loneliness. There are no nobles, no queens, only fugitives, criminals, runaway, slaves. But that is Rome's strength. You watch Romulus establish order from chaos. He forms a senate, a council of 100 men, not aristocrats, but warriors and survivors. They are called patres, fathers of Rome. This is not democracy, not yet, but it is something new, structure born from wilderness. A new problem rises. There are no women, no families, no future. Romulus devises a plan. He invites neighboring tribes, especially the Sabines, into a grand festival. They come with wives, sisters, daughters, and when the music begins, the trap is sprung. The Romans seize the women, kidnap them. You witness the betrayal, the horror, the fury. War erupts. But then, something unexpected happens. The kidnapped women, now caught between two worlds, step forward. They have children now, families. They stand between swords and beg for peace, and you see it happen. The Sabine women stop the bloodshed. By choosing love over loyalty, they become the mothers of Rome. Romulus rules for many years. One day, while reviewing his troops, he vanishes into a storm. No body is ever found. Some say the gods took him, others say the Senate silenced him. But the myth lives on. Romulus ascended to the heavens. He becomes the god Quirinus, protector of the Roman people. You stand there at the end of this first chapter and watch Rome grow. No one taught it how to rule. It learned through hunger, through struggle. Rome was not given greatness, it took it. This is where it begins, not in elegance, but in death, wilderness, and unyielding will. Chapter 2. The Roman Republic, laws, betrayals, and the rise of the people. You open your eyes to a city that has outlived its founders. Romulus is gone. The legends have faded into memory, but the city, Rome, remains. No longer a wild gathering of shepherds and thieves. Now it is something more. The kings have ruled long enough. You stand among the people, plebeians, hungry and angry, watching the last king of Rome, Tarquinius Superbus, strut through the streets. They call him Superbus the Proud, and proud he is, of his bloodline, his palace, his power. But you feel the tension thick in the air. Rome no longer wants kings. Then it happens. A crime, brutal and personal. You witness the aftermath as Lucretia, a noblewoman, takes her own life. She names her violator, the king's own son. And you see what one injustice can do to a city on the edge. A man steps forward. Lucius Junius Brutus. He does not weep. He does not plead. He raises the bloodied dagger before the people and cries out, "By this blood I swear never again shall Rome kneel to a king." The people rise, the monarchy falls. You are there when the last king is driven out, and in the year 509 BCE, something new is born, a republic. No more crowns, no divine rule. Now Rome will be governed by laws, not men. You watch as the people elect 2 consuls each year, not kings, but leaders with limits. They must agree to act. They serve for 1 year only. And beyond them is the Senate, old, wise, and cautious. But not everyone has power. The aristocrats, the patricians, write the rules. The commoners, the plebeians, bleed in war but remain voiceless at home. You see anger rise again. The plebeians walk out, literally. They leave the city, refuse to fight, refuse to work. And in that silence, the Republic listens. Rome begins to change, because it must. You see the birth of new roles, the tribunes, defenders of the people, with the power to veto. You hear the laws etched into bronze tablets, the 12 tables, displayed in the forum for all to see. Justice is no longer whispered in temples. It is written in stone, for even the poorest citizen to read. This is not equality, not yet. But for the first time, the idea has taken root. Years pass. Rome grows stronger and more complicated. You are there when Rome learns to govern itself, not just in times of peace, but in crisis. A new office emerges, the dictator, chosen only in times of dire need. He holds absolute power, but only for 6 months. A sword drawn in emergency, then sheathed again. And yet you feel a shadow. Power never vanishes quietly. You walk the streets and see proud Roman citizens, artisans, merchants, farmers, calling themselves liberi, free. But always hovering above are the optimates and populares, the rich, the powerful, the ambitious. The Senate debates endlessly. Tribunes shout, consuls quarrel, but Rome endures. Because somehow, the chaos balances itself. You see something strange forming, a system not ruled by force but by friction. This is the Republic, flawed, imperfect, but it is not a man. It is an idea. And you realize Rome has built something stronger than stone walls. A belief in law, in duty, in the people's voice. But this peace cannot last forever. In the distance you hear marching. Rome's enemies are gathering. And inside the city, ambition still burns. You sense it now, the Republic will be tested. By war, by betrayal, by power. Hungry men who call themselves saviors. But for now, the people rule. You stood when the kings fell. You heard the cries. For justice, you watched a republic take its first breath. But freedom, like fire, must be fed, or it will flicker and die. Chapter 3. Enemies at the gates. Gauls, Etruscans, and Rome reborn. You feel the wind shift. Rome is no longer a fragile experiment. The Republic stands. Its laws are carved in bronze. Its people are proud. But outside the city walls, dangers gather like clouds before a storm. You are no longer just a citizen. You are now a soldier, one among many, trained to hold a shield, march in formation and die if necessary. Because Rome, though mighty in spirit, is still small in the eyes of the world. And the world is not kind. First, you face your oldest rivals, the Etruscans. You remember them, the former masters of Rome, rich in art, iron, and arrogance. Their cities rise in the north, fortified, defiant. They have not forgotten Rome's rebellion. You march against them alongside your brothers. You fight in narrow valleys and siege high walls. The Etruscans fall, one city at a time, not through raw strength, but through Roman persistence. Rome does not conquer in a single blow. It wears down its enemies like water-carving stone. But peace never lasts. Then comes the terror, not from the north, not from the sea, but from beyond the Alps. They come with wild hair, painted faces, and a hunger for gold and glory. The Gauls. You watch in horror as they sweep through the countryside, undisciplined but unstoppable. They reach Rome before you can stop them. The City falls. You hide in the shadows of the Capitoline Hill, where a desperate group of defenders clings to the sacred flame of Rome. You hear the cries. You smell the smoke. Rome, your home is burning. The Gauls demand ransom, and Rome pays it. You never forget the shame. Even when the gold is handed over, you hear the Gallic chief raise his sword and say, "Vae victis," woe to the vanquished. You never forget those words. But Rome does not stay down. You help rebuild the city, not just in brick and stone, but in will. The walls grow taller, the legions train harder. The Servian wall is built, not as decoration, but as defiance. You sense something change. Rome learns that glory means nothing if you cannot protect your own heart. So Rome begins to look inward and outward. You face other enemies now. In the south, Samnites, fierce mountain warriors. In the hills, Volsci and Equi, striking like wolves. Even former allies turn hostile. But this time Rome is ready. You fight not for conquest, but for survival. You see Rome learn with every loss. The Manipular Legion is born. Not rigid ranks, but flexible, lethal formations. Rome doesn't just fight wars, it studies them. And then Rome begins to win. One by one, the tribes fall into alliance or submission. And Rome offers something more than fear. It offers citizenship. Not full rights, not yet, but a place under the Roman sky, a future. This is how Rome expands, not by wiping cultures out, but by binding them to itself, by turning enemies into allies, outsiders into Romans. You stand in the Forum years later. The wounds of the Gallic sack still ache in memory, but Rome is no longer the same city. The Republic has found its backbone. Its legions are no longer untested, its people no longer. Naive. Rome has been beaten, burned, and humiliated. But now it walks taller, speaks louder, and marches farther. You realize something chilling and exhilarating. Rome will never let this happen again. You watch the walls fall. You buried the dead. You carried Rome on your shoulders through fire and fear. And now you march forward, not as a survivor, but as the builder of an empire. Chapter 4. Conquest of Italy. Roads, spears, and unity by force. You stand at the edge of a ridge, gazing down at a valley that once belonged to an enemy. Now it bears the Roman eagle. You are no longer defending your homeland. You are expanding. Yet after Rome, once a frightened city burned by Gauls, has become a machine, a relentless, calculating force. You have seen it change. You've helped shape it. And now, as Italy lies before you, fractured into rival tribes and city-states, you know what must happen. Unification, not through diplomacy, through conquest. It begins with the Samnites, your fiercest challenge yet. They are mountain people. Tough, stubborn, born to the rocks. They do not bow. You fight them for decades in brutal mountain campaigns. Every step forward is paid in blood. You remember the Battle of the Caudine Forks, where your army was trapped and humiliated, forced to march under the yoke of defeat. But Rome does not break. It learns. You return, stronger, smarter, with new tactics, with roads that cut through mountains, with colonies planted like seeds of Rome across the land. And this time the Samnites fall. Then come the Latin allies, those who once stood beside you. Now they rise against you, seeking equality, or perhaps independence. You crush the rebellion, but you do something bold. You offer them a deal. You are not enemies, you are Romans now. You extend partial citizenship, not just to rule, but to bind. A web of roads stretches from Rome to their cities, not just for trade, but for troops. Rome is no longer a city-state. It is a network, a system, a body with a single heart and many limbs. You turn south. There in the rich lands of Magna Graecia, Greek colonies thrive. Tarentum, Croton, Heraclea. They are wealthy, proud, and connected to the wider Hellenic world. When war comes, they call for help, and help arrives in the form of Pyrrhus of Epirus, a king, a tactician, a descendant of Achilles. You face his war elephants and brilliant formations. You see your comrades trampled, your lines shattered, but you do not flee. At Heraclea, you are defeated. At Asculum, you bleed again. Pyrrhus wins, but at a cost he cannot bear. Another such victory, he says, and I am undone. The Pyrrhic victory is born, and with it, Rome's legend grows. You are part of a new world now, a world where roads radiate from Rome like arteries, where defeated enemies become future allies, where laws travel faster than rebellion, and every child born under the Roman sky is taught not just Latin, but loyalty. You stand at a milestone, carved along the Via Appia, one of many roads now crisscrossing Italy. You know what it means. Rome has done the impossible. It has united the Italian peninsula, not just with force, but with vision. You have marched for years. You have buried. Friends taken cities and raised standards. And now Italy is Rome, and Rome is ready for the world. Chapter 5. Carthage must be destroyed. The Punic Wars begin. You stand on the shores of Italy, but your eyes are drawn across the waves. There lies Carthage. You don't know her yet, not truly, but you will. She is rich, ancient, powerful. She commands the Western Mediterranean with her navy, her trade, her wealth. She is a city of merchants, of sailors, of empire builders, and she stands in your way. At first, it is not hatred, it is business. The spark is Sicily, the jewel between your lands, a place of Greek colonies, fertile fields, and strategic harbors. When a small conflict erupts in Messana, both Rome and Carthage respond. Both land forces. Both claim the right to protect. And then, the first blood is spilled. The First Punic. War begins. You were raised as a soldier of land, but now you must fight on sea. Rome has no real navy. Carthage commands the waves, but Rome adapts. You remember the first ships, copies of Carthaginian vessels, built in haste, crude and clumsy. But then comes the Corvus, the boarding bridge. Now your infantry can turn sea battles into land combat. You are part of the first Roman fleet to win a great naval battle. You see the Carthaginian sails burn on the horizon. You feel the tide turn. Years pass. The war drags on back and forth. Land battles in Sicily, sieges, naval disasters. You lose fleets to storms, thousands of lives swallowed by Poseidon. But Rome does not stop. Rome never stops. Finally, you stand. At Agate's Islands, a massive naval clash, and this time you win. Carthage sues for peace. Sicily becomes Rome's first province. You have stepped beyond Italy, and there is no going back. But Carthage does not forget. Neither do you. Years later, you hear his name whispered like a curse and a challenge. Hannibal. He crosses the Alps with elephants and vengeance in his heart. He wins battles you never thought could be lost. Trebia, Lake Trasimene, Cannae. At Cannae, you are there. You see 50,000 Romans slaughtered in a single day. You survive, barely. Rome is shaken, but not broken. You join Fabius Maximus, the delayer, harassing Hannibal, starving him of reinforcements. Then comes Scipio Africanus, bold, brilliant. He brings the war to Africa. You follow him to Zama, where Hannibal is finally defeated. Rome wins the Second Punic War. You return to Rome in triumph. You see the Senate grow bolder. You see Rome richer, stronger, stretched across seas. But you also see fear. Carthage still stands, and in the Senate, one voice grows louder with each speech. Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. You thought the war was over. You thought victory would bring peace. But the shadow of Carthage lingers, and Rome does not forget. Chapter 6. The Fall of Carthage. Salted earth and imperial ambition. You've heard the speeches. You've seen the maps. You've fought the wars. And now, as you walk the marbled halls of the Roman Senate, you hear the same voice again. Carthago. Delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. The speaker is Cato the Elder, old but unyielding. At the end of every speech, no matter the topic, he reminds you of the threat across the sea, and you believe him. Carthage is no longer an equal. She has been humbled, her navy disbanded, her empire shattered, but she still breathes. And to Rome, that is unacceptable. You return to Africa for the third and final time. The Third Punic War is not about power. It is about elimination. You watch as Carthage pleads, offering hostages, weapons, even self-disarmament, but it's not enough. The Senate has made up its mind. Carthage must die. The siege begins. You stand outside the great walls of Carthage, taller than anything you've faced. Inside, the people refuse to surrender. They melt their gold to forge weapons. They turn rooftops into battlements. And then Rome attacks. You breach the harbor. You scale the walls. You fight for every street, every courtyard, every house. The city resists for 3 years. You remember the fire, the screams, the smoke rising into the red sky. You remember when it finally ends. You walk the silent streets. You see corpses in the temples. You see children dragged into slavery. And finally, you see the ground, salted, not to poison it, to send a message. Carthage is no more. Music slows, grave and majestic. Back in Rome, there is no cheering. Only silence, a kind of awe. You have seen what Rome can do when it is afraid, or angry, or determined. And now with Carthage gone, you wonder, what comes next? The answer soon arrives. Without Carthage to fight, Rome turns elsewhere. To Greece, the cradle of philosophy and art. To Macedon, the legacy of Alexander. To the Hellenistic East, where kings still believe they can challenge Rome. You march again, not as a soldier of defense, but as a conqueror. You defeat Philip of Macedon. You break the Seleucid power. You take Corinth, and with it, the soul of Greece. You walk among statues of gods and philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, Homer, and declare, these now belong to Rome. You have destroyed your greatest enemy. You have conquered the cradle of civilization. And now Rome stands at the edge of the world, looking for more. Chapter 7. Bread, Blood, and the Mob. The Republic starts to crack you. Return from war expecting glory. You've conquered Greece. You've crushed Carthage. You've helped shape a world now ruled from Rome. But when you arrive, you find something different. The city is richer. The temples grander. The streets are louder. You walk through Rome's forum, but it feels unfamiliar. Every alley buzzes with tension. Every monument casts a shadow longer than before. Rome has defeated its enemies, and now it begins to consume itself. You are no longer a soldier. You are a citizen again. But the land you fought for, it's gone. The countryside has changed. The farms of your fellow veterans have been bought, absorbed into massive estates, latifundia, worked by foreign slaves captured in war. You see the owners dine in marble villas while beggars crowd the gates. The Republic, once a city of citizen farmers, is becoming a city of wealth and poverty, with nothing in between. Music darkens, a rhythmic beat like a political march. You're not the only one who sees it. Two brothers rise from the plebeians, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. You stand among the crowd as Tiberius proposes land reform, giving land back to the poor, to the soldiers, to you. You cheer. You believe. But the Senate sees danger. They murder him in public. Then Gaius. Rome's rulers have spilled Roman blood in the name of tradition. You realize something terrible. Power now lives in fear, and fear is armed. The Republic begins to fracture. You watch generals become politicians. You watch politicians hire private armies. You see Marius, a man of the people, reform the legions, arming the landless, making soldiers loyal to generals, not the state. Then comes Sulla, his bitter rival, and with him, the unthinkable. A Roman army marches on Rome itself. You survive the civil war, but the Republic does not. What remains is a government drenched in blood and suspicion. Consuls are now warlords. Senators cling to power. The mob, restless and hungry, is easily swayed by food and spectacle. You stand in the Circus Maximus. You hear the crowd chant not for law, but for bread and blood. The Republic is still alive, but only in name. Then, hope flickers. Three figures rise. Crassus, the richest man in Rome, Pompey, the great general, and a young politician with charm, ambition, and a famous name, Gaius Julius Caesar. They form an alliance, the first triumvirate. Together, they control Rome from the shadows, but shadows don't last forever. You look into Caesar's eyes and See something dangerous, not a man content to share power, but one who was born to rule. You have survived war, poverty, and betrayal, but now you stand at the edge of something new. The Republic is rotting from within, and one man is about to seize the moment. Chapter 8, Caesar Rises, the Rubicon and the End of the Republic. You remember him well. Julius Caesar. He wasn't the strongest, nor the richest, but he knew what others feared. That power was no longer in the Senate. It was in the streets, the legions, the hearts of the people, and he knew how to use all three. You walk beside him when he speaks in the forum. You see the crowds lean in, enchanted by his words. You see the poor call him father. The veterans call him brother. And the Senate calls him dangerous, but you call him inevitable. They send him to Gaul, hoping to bury him in endless war. Instead, he conquers it. You ride with him as he crushes tribes, builds roads, and writes dispatches that make him a legend. For 10 years, he turns Gaul into a Roman possession and turns his army into a tool of destiny. When Rome tells him to disband his legions and return alone, he doesn't hesitate. He rides to the banks of a small river, the Rubicon. You stand with him that night, under the stars, silent, watching the water flow. Then he says it, quietly, almost like a whisper to himself. Alea iacta est. The die is cast, and he crosses. It's not just a river, it's the point of no return. You march on Rome itself. The city panics. The Senate flees. Pompey runs east to gather forces. And Caesar? He walks into Rome without drawing a sword. But peace will not come so easily. You chase Pompey across Greece. You fight at Pharsalus, legion against legion, Roman against Roman. You see friends fall, you see victory, you see Pompey die, not by your blade, but betrayed in Egypt. In Alexandria, you meet Cleopatra. She is bold, intelligent, ruthless, and Caesar sees in her a reflection of himself. Together they form an alliance of power and ambition. You leave Egypt with a child born of two worlds, and Caesar stronger than ever. Back in Rome, he returns not just as a general, but as a dictator. You watch him reform laws, cancel debts, build infrastructure, but some whisper that he does too much, too fast, that he does not ask for power. He takes it, and then he is offered a crown. He refuses, publicly. But privately you wonder, how long until he stops pretending? In the Senate, daggers are being drawn. Old men in togas plot behind marble pillars. They speak of saving the Republic by killing its most powerful son. You are there, on the Ides of March. You see Caesar walk into the Senate, unguarded, confident. You hear the first gasp, the first blade, and then many. You see him fall beneath the statue of Pompey, his blood pooling where speeches once echoed. You hear his final words, not to the mob, not to history, but to a friend, et tu, brute. You followed him through war, reform, and glory. You saw him seize the world and lose it in a moment, but in death Caesar planted a seed, and Rome will never be the same. Chapter 9, The Revenge of the Heir, Augustus and the Birth of an Empire. You were there when Caesar fell. You heard the screams. You saw senators with bloodied togas run into the streets shouting, "Liberty!" But Rome does not cheer. It trembles. The Republic hasn't been saved. It's been shattered. The city is leaderless. Its streets fill with riots, its temples with fear. And into this chaos steps a figure no one expected. A boy. He's just 19 years old, soft-spoken, delicate, barely. "Hey man," but you hear his name and suddenly the crowd listens. Gaius Octavius. Caesar's heir by blood, adopted in Caesar's will. By law a private citizen, but in heart Rome's last chance for order. You watch him carefully. He speaks little but moves quickly. He claims Caesar's fortune. He raises a private army. And then he makes peace with Caesar's former enemies. With one goal, revenge. He forms an uneasy alliance with Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general, and Lepidus, the forgotten third. Together, they become the second triumvirate. And the first thing they do, they kill. You see the names posted. Lists of enemies, prescriptions, Thousands of citizens marked for death, including Cicero, voice of the Republic. This is no longer about liberty, it is about survival. You ride with Octavian and Antony to Philippi in Greece. There, you face the armies of Brutus and Cassius, the assassins of Caesar. You fight in dust and fear, steel on steel, Roman against Roman, and when it's over, the assassins lie dead. The debt of Caesar's murder is paid, but peace, it dies with them. The alliance crumbles. Lepidus is cast aside. Antony drifts east into Cleopatra's arms. You hear the rumors that he worships like a god, that he lives as a king, that he will make Alexandria, not Rome, the heart of the world, and Octavian. He prepares. You see him rally Rome with quiet precision. He paints Antony as a traitor, as a foreign puppet. He opens Caesar's will, reveals a generous gift to the people, plays to their memory, their grief, their pride. He becomes Caesar reborn, not by force but by consent. And then war begins. You sail with Octavian to Actium, off the coast of Greece. A sea battle, Rome against Rome. Antony and Cleopatra's massive fleet waits on the horizon, but they are slow, divided. You watch as their ships burn, as their dreams sink beneath the waves, and in the end, they flee. Back to Egypt, back to death. You hear how Antony dies by his own sword, how Cleopatra lets an asp bite her skin, and with them, the old world dies too. Octavian returns to Rome, but not as a general, not as a tyrant. He gives power back to the Senate. Least he pretends to. They name him Augustus, the revered one, not king, not dictator, but something new. You realize as you stand in the forum beneath a golden statue, the Republic is gone. But Rome is not. A new order rises, an empire and Augustus. He is its first emperor. You have seen the fall of one world and the birth of another. The streets still whisper of the Republic, but the banners now bear one name, and the world belongs to Rome. Chapter 10. Pax Romana, peace at a price. You remember chaos, you remember blood in the forum, dictators, assassins, civil war, but now you walk through a Rome reborn. The temples shine again, the aqueducts flow, the people cheer, not for bread, but for Augustus. You feel something you haven't felt in a long time, peace. This is the world Augustus built. You see roads stretch from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. You walk them in safety. You trade in cities you've never heard of, in languages you don't speak, yet all call themselves Rome. They call it the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. It will last 200 years, and you, a citizen of this empire, enjoy what was once only dreamed of: law, prosperity, stability. The army no longer fights for Rome, it guards Rome. From the wild forests of Germania to the scorching sands of Arabia, Roman standards rise high, and under them the world calms. But peace has its price. You begin to notice. The Senate speaks, but only to agree. Governors rule far provinces, but all report to one man. The old freedoms are still spoken of, but only in past tense. You realize something profound. Augustus didn't restore the Republic. He buried it beautifully. You grow older. Augustus grows older. He names no king, no heir, only a successor. Tiberius, a quiet man, a soldier, but not beloved. When Augustus dies, the empire does not collapse. No war follows. No vote is held. Instead, the Senate simply confirms the new emperor. And just like that, the dream of the Republic dies with a whisper, not a scream. You hear people still praise Augustus. Statues rise. Coins bear his image. He becomes more than man. He becomes a god, and you wonder, has Rome conquered the world? Or has one man conquered Rome? But the world marvels at your city. They see the baths, the roads, the order. They see amphitheaters full of games. They hear poets sing of a golden age. They see legions march in perfect rhythm, and they believe. You believe. For now the world works, and Rome endures. You live in the greatest empire the world has ever seen. You walk roads that lead to every corner of civilization. You speak the tongue of empire. You are a Roman. And for now, there. is peace. Chapter 11. Madness behind the marble, the emperors who followed. Augustus is gone. You stood in the crowd as his funeral pyre lit the Roman night. You heard priests whisper that he had become a god. You felt for a moment that Rome might crumble. Without him, but it doesn't, it survives. Yet something has changed. Now you look not to the Senate or the Forum, you look to the palace and the man inside it, Tiberius, the heir, the shadow. He rules but does not shine. You walk in a Rome that still thrives, but where smiles feel forced, where suspicion grows like ivy on every column, where the word treason whispers behind every closed door, and then he disappears. He retreats to Capri, a lonely island, a fortress, a prison of his own making. There, you hear of orgies, of spies, of murders ordered by letter. You hear of Sejanus, his trusted commander, rising, then falling, then hanging. Rome continues to function, but the soul of the city? It begins to crack, and when Tiberius finally dies, you think maybe things will get better. They do not, because now you serve in Caligula. At first he is adored. You are there when crowds cheer his name, when coins bear his young face like a new dawn, but then the madness creeps in. You hear he made his horse a priest, then a senator. You hear of executions without trial, of games where nobles are thrown to beasts, of incest whispered behind the marble walls. One day you pass a statue of Jupiter, and someone says, Caligula made it remove its head and replace it with his own. And one day the palace guards do something no legion dared do before. They murder their emperor, right there in a hallway, steel against flesh, no gods, no glory, just silence. Enter Claudius, an old man with a limp, a stutter, and a library. Of scrolls, you think, surely not him, but you are wrong, he governs wisely. He expands Rome into Britannia. He reforms the law. He restores dignity, and yet he too is not safe. You hear his own wife, Agrippina, poisons him, so her son can rise. And that son is Nero. At first he plays the lyre, he writes poetry, he gives bread to the poor, but then he kills his mother. He burns the city. He blames the Christians. You hear screams in the night, not from barbarians, but from Rome itself. You see statues melted down to pay for theater shows. Senators forced to applaud bad poetry or die. You see the face of Rome, once proud, once godlike, now mocked, feared, crumbling from within. Music becomes desperate, heavy, nearly broken. And when Rome finally turns on Nero, he runs alone. Hunted, you hear the words as he places a dagger to his own throat. What an artist dies in me, and he is gone. You thought emperors would bring glory, but behind the marble, you saw madness. The empire still stands, but for how long can the mask hold? Chapter 12, Vespasian and the Flavian Fire, building after ruin. You watched Nero fall. You heard the cry, the emperor is dead. Who rules now? The answer, everyone and no one. One after another, men seize the purple. Galba, old, stern, murdered by his own guards. Otho, suave, quick, takes his own life after a single defeat. Vitellius, greedy, brutal, dragged through the streets, throat cut at the palace steps. It is the year of the 4 emperors, and Rome is bleeding. But then, from the east, a new figure rises. Music sharpens into a gritty military march. You hear his name whispered by the legions, Vespasian, a general, a soldier's soldier, not noble, not rich, not polished, but tough. He commands loyalty, not with promises, but with results. He takes Rome not in a parade, but in a storm. You see flames in the streets, bodies piled like broken columns. The people are tired, hungry, afraid, and Vespasian, he says little, but he acts. He begins to clean, the rot left behind. The palace gold is gone. So he taxes urine, yes, urine, you laugh, you grimace, but it works. He stabilizes the treasury, restores discipline, reminds the Senate how to function, and above all, he builds. The Colosseum rises. You walk past its skeleton of stone and scaffolding. You hear the hammering of history, This is no temple to the gods, it's a gift to the people. Bread and games, blood and spectacle. And you understand, Rome no longer survives by law or liberty, it survives by order and entertainment. You watch his sons grow in the shadow of his rule. Titus, noble, disciplined, loved by the legions. Domitian, sharp, quiet eyes always watching. When Vespasian dies, he does not fear it, his final words. Alas, I think I am becoming a god. And he laughs, because he knows this is no longer a republic of men. This is the age of divine emperors. Under Titus, you witness a paradox, a gentle emperor. In a time of horror, Pompeii erupts, ash swallows a city whole. You see survivors arrive, ghost-eyed, covered in soot. And then, another disaster, a great fire in Rome. Titus opens his own coffers to rebuild. He walks among the people. You feel the city's love for him grow, but the gods are not kind. Titus rules only 2 years and then he dies. Now comes Domitian. You hoped he would follow his father's strength, his brother's heart, but he trusts no one. You see statues erected of himself. You hear his titles multiply, Lord and God, everlasting Caesar, conqueror of time. Senators bow low, not from respect but from fear. He rules for 15 years, efficient, ruthless, paranoid, and in the end, he is stabbed in his own palace. His name is erased. You walked through fire and famine. You saw emperors rise from rubble, some built, some burned, and still the eternal city endures. Chapter 13, The Philosopher and the Warrior. Trajan, Hadrian, and the empire at its peak. You've lived through madness. You've seen emperors burn, bleed, and vanish. But now something new begins. You walk the streets of a Rome that feels stable, not perfect, but proud. The Flavian house is gone. A new dynasty rises, and at its heart, a man chosen not by blood, but by merit. His name is Trajan, not Roman born, but a Spaniard, a soldier, forged in discipline. You hear the legions cheer for him, not out of fear, but respect, and soon you understand why. You follow his banners east, across the Danube, through Dacia. You see cities burn, gold taken, kings humbled. The Dacian wars feed the Roman coffers. They feed something else too, your pride. Triumphal, arches rise, markets burst with foreign goods. A column spirals into the sky, etched with every victory, every death, every glory. Trajan's column. You walk past it often. You read your empire's story in stone, and you think, this must be the peak. You are right. For under Trajan, Rome reaches its greatest size, from the red sands of Arabia to the green hills of Britannia, from the icy Rhine to the sunlit Nile. All roads truly lead to Rome, but Trajan grows old. He has no son. So once again, he does something powerful. He chooses his heir, a man of vision, a man with walls in his mind as much as in his plans. His name is Hadrian. Hadrian is not like Trajan. He doesn't conquer. He defines. You travel with him, not as a soldier, but as a student. He visits every province, speaks every tongue, listens more than he commands. You walk the new borders he marks, and on one misty frontier in the north, you see it, Hadrian's Wall, a boundary, not just of land, but of ambition. Rome will grow no further. Instead, it will think. Hadrian loves art, architecture, ideas. He builds the Pantheon, a dome like the sky carved in marble and mathematics. He builds libraries, villas, monuments, but his heart is not made of stone. You see him mourn a young Greek boy. Antinous, his grief becomes divine. A mortal man becomes a god. Statues rise across the empire, and you feel it. This emperor rules not with sword, but with soul. Hadrian prepares for death. He writes letters, chooses another heir, and he leaves behind not just roads and cities, but an idea that Rome isn't just a place, it's not just conquest, it is culture, it is mind. You marched with Trajan, you pondered with Hadrian, and in their hands Rome reached its greatest height, not just in land, but in legacy. Chapter 14. From good men to broken thrones, Marcus Aurelius and the beginning of the end. You remember Hadrian's death. It was quiet, almost gentle, like a final breath exhaled across the empire. But before he left, he chose his successor, carefully, not for blood, not for ambition, but for wisdom. You hear his name whispered with hope, Marcus Aurelius. You meet him not on a battlefield, but in a library. A man who thinks before he speaks, who writes at night in Greek, not to others, but to himself. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. He does not seek glory, he seeks virtue. But Rome, now more than ever, demands more than thought. It demands strength. The frontiers boil again. From the north, barbarian tribes press, hard against the empire's edge. You follow Marcus to the Danube, where legions freeze beneath pine trees waiting for the next raid. He fights not because he wants to, but because he must, and while swords clash, he writes, "The obstacle is the way." You see him lose friends, soldiers, his own children. You see the burden of rule carved deeper into his eyes, but still he endures. Beside him stands a co-emperor, Lucius Verus, a contrast in luxury and laughter. They share the rule. Until plague arrives, a sickness from the east. Lucius dies, the empire weakens, and Marcus continues alone until something changes. He does what Hadrian and Trajan never did. He breaks the pattern. He names his own son, Commodus, as heir. You wonder why. Some say it's love, others say exhaustion, but deep down you feel it. Marcus, the philosopher emperor, is tired. When he finally dies in a cold frontier camp far from Rome, the empire mourns, but not for long, because now the boy becomes Emperor Commodus. He wears the purple with pride and madness. He believes he is Hercules reborn. He dresses as a gladiator. He fights in the Colosseum, slaying animals and men for sport. You see the Senate humiliated. You see statues torn down, laws ignored, gold wasted. And when Rome finally acts, it is not the people or politicians who stop him. It is those closest to him. He is strangled in his bath by his own wrestling partner. The empire breathes out, confused. Was it still the Rome Marcus had protected, or had the decline already begun? You look around and see cracks forming in the marble, not yet collapse, but the tremors have started. The good men are gone, and the throne begins to splinter. Chapter 15, the crisis of the 3rd century. When the empire almost died, you once thought Rome eternal, streets of marble, roads without end, emperors crowned in gold. But now you see something different. Confusion, division, fear. The throne is no longer sacred. It is a gamble, one with swords lost with whispers. 1 year, one emperor. Next year, dead. Then another, and another. You stop counting. In just 50 years, more than 20 emperors rise and fall. Some are assassinated by their guards, some by their rivals, some by their own sons. The empire becomes a game of dice played with blood. And you survive by keeping your head down. But even that isn't enough, because the world around you begins to crack. From the north, Germanic tribes flood across the borders. From the east, a new Persian empire rises, the Sassanids. They burn Roman cities. They capture emperors. You hear the name Valerian, as once powerful, now caged like an animal in a Persian court, forced to kneel before a foreign king. You feel humiliation. Rome, the conqueror of the world, is now prey. But the danger is not just outside. Inside, the provinces begin to break away. You hear of a Gallic empire in the west, a Palmyrene empire in the east. They print their own coins, raise their own legions, rule without Rome, and for a moment, the empire no longer exists, only the idea of it, only pieces. You live in fragments. Some days you forget who the emperor is. Other days, it changes before sunset. But then, a figure emerges, not from the Senate, not from Rome, but from the military camps. A man of action, not words, Aurelian. He is hard, severe, relentless. But he does not seek glory, he seeks unity. And somehow, Against the odds, he delivers it. He defeats the Gallic breakaway. He defeats the Palmyrene queen, Zenobia, who once dreamed of building an empire to rival Rome. He binds the fragments back together, and when the people ask what he is, he answers with a title never spoken before, Restitutor Orbis, Restorer of the World. But even he cannot restore it forever. The cracks are still there. The armies still rule more than the Senate. The frontiers are still bleeding, and you realize Rome didn't fall. It started slipping slowly, quietly, while no one was watching. Chapter 16. Diocletian and the Illusion of Control, Dividing an Empire to Save It. You stand in a city that still calls itself Rome, but something feels different now. The streets are quieter. The statues are cracked. The gods seem distant, and then you hear the name Diocletian. He doesn't come from the nobility. He rises through the ranks from a soldier to emperor, not by inheritance, but by sheer will. You don't cheer when he takes power. You hold your breath, because by now you've seen emperors come and go like shadows. But Diocletian is different. He doesn't try to be a god. He becomes one, or so he claims. He dresses in purple robes, wears a golden crown, and demands to be addressed as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. You kneel when he enters, you lower your eyes. The emperor is no longer among men. He stands above them, and yet it works. He brings order. He sees that Rome is too large, too unstable, too stretched to be ruled by one man. So he does something no emperor has dared. He splits it in half. He names a second emperor, Maximian, to rule the western provinces. And below them, 2 junior emperors, Caesars, to share the burden. 4 emperors, 1 empire. They call it the Tetrarchy. You live under this system. It feels organized, managed, almost modern. Borders are strengthened. Taxes are restructured. Rebellions are crushed. And for a moment you believe that Rome might endure. But Diocletian isn't done. He looks to the gods, and what he sees terrifies him. A new faith has been growing, quietly, in homes, in catacombs, in whispers. Christianity, a religion that refuses to worship the emperor. That calls all men equal before one unseen god. Diocletian sees danger. He orders churches burned, scriptures destroyed, believers executed. You watch your neighbors dragged from their homes. You see crosses turned into symbols of death. The great persecution begins. And yet the faith does not die. It spreads underground in prisons, on lips. It spreads with fire and blood. And then Diocletian does something Rome has never seen. He retires. He walks away from the throne, back to his homeland, back to a quiet palace overlooking the sea. No emperor has ever done this. You wonder, was it wisdom or weariness? Because once he's gone, the system he built begins to crack. The Caesars turn on each other. The unity he forced starts to splinter, and once again Rome is pulled into chaos. You thought dividing the empire might save it, but perhaps it only showed how fragile it really was. Chapter 17. Constantine and the Cross, the emperor who changed everything. You've lived through emperors who claimed to be gods. Now you witness one who bows to a single god. His name is Constantine, but when you first hear it, he's only one, among many rivals. Sons of former emperors, generals with legions, each staking a claim to a broken empire. The Tetrarchy has failed. What Diocletian built with control, ambition now tears apart. Civil war spreads like fire across the provinces. And you? You pick a side, not from loyalty, but from survival. Then, you see Constantine rise, not in Rome, but from the provinces of the West. A soldier, a thinker, a man molded by chaos. He marches across Gaul, crosses the Alps, and heads straight for the gates of Rome. Waiting there is Maxentius, another claimant to power, entrenched, confident, cruel. And before the battle begins, something happens. Constantine sees a sign. You hear the story whispered in camps and marketplaces. A vision in the sky, a cross of light with the words, "In this sign you will conquer." That night, he orders his soldiers to paint a symbol on their shields. Chiro, the E, first letters of Christos. You've seen Roman shields for years. Today they bear something different. When the battle comes at the Milvian Bridge, you watch from the hills. Maxentius drowns in the river. the city opens its gates, and Constantine rides into Rome, not as a destroyer, but as a chosen one. He becomes Emperor of the West. But he does not stop. One by one he defeats his rivals, until finally he stands alone, the sole ruler of the Roman Empire. And then he does something unimaginable. He legalizes Christianity. He signs the Edict of Milan. No more burning churches. No more hunted believers. Now Christians walk freely in the streets. You hear hymns in daylight, not just whispered in catacombs. Temples still stand, but they feel quieter. Something is changing. But Constantine doesn't just stop at toleration. He embraces the faith. He funds churches. He surrounds himself with bishops. And though he's not baptized yet, he begins to shape an empire that no longer serves the old gods. Then he does something no emperor has dared since Romulus. He builds a new capital, not in Rome, but in the east, by the shores of the Bosporus, Constantinople. You walk its streets, still under construction, and feel it. This is a city for a new Rome, a Rome of emperors and apostles, of marble and mystery, a Rome that faces east, toward trade, toward Jerusalem, toward the rising sun. And when Constantine dies, baptized on his deathbed, you see him honored not as a man who ruled like a god, but as a servant of the one true God. He changed the empire's heart. He changed your world. Chapter 18, Sons of Constantine, Division, Betrayal, and the Christian Empire. You remember the death of Constantine. The streets of Constantinople are draped in black. Church bells ring, the people mourn. But behind the veils of grief, you sense something colder, ambition. Because Constantine left not one heir but three sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. They do not share power easily, no one ever does. The empire is divided between them, west, center, east. Each holds a portion. Each believes he deserves more. You see the cracks forming before the funeral ends. Within months, the empire bleeds again. A quiet purge sweeps the court. Cousins, uncles, and rivals vanish. You hear rumors of poison, knives, nighttime executions. The sons want no challengers, only each other. Constantine II, eldest, attacks his brother's territory. He is ambushed and killed. Now two remain. But peace doesn't last. Constans rules the west, and rules poorly. Arrogant, harsh, distrusted. His own generals turn against him. He is murdered in Gaul. Only one remains, Constantius II. You watch him, become sole emperor, cold, calculating, obsessed with order. But while he secures the throne, he cannot secure unity, because now it's no longer about politics. It's about faith. The empire is Christian, but Christianity is divided. You hear arguments in the streets, in churches, even in homes. Is Christ equal to God the Father? Or is he beneath him? These are not just questions for priests. They are wars of belief. Constantius sides with the Arians, a faction that denies Christ's full divinity. Others call it heresy. Bishops are exiled. Riots break out. Altars are overturned. You watch as the empire turns on itself, not with swords, mice, but with scripture. And all the while, beyond the borders, enemies gather strength. The Sassanid Persians rise again in the east. Germanic tribes press from the north. But Constantius seems blind to it. He is too busy fighting shadows in the churches. Then, suddenly he dies. No heir, no son. But there is one man left, a name spoken with hesitation and awe. Julian, a nephew of Constantine, raised in hiding, educated in Athens, a philosopher, a pagan, and now emperor. You don't know whether to kneel or to fear him, because with Julian the old gods rise again. Chapter 19. Julian the Apostate, the last pagan emperor. You hear the rumors before you see him. A philosopher, a soldier, a man with ink-stained hands and calloused fingers from holding a sword and scroll alike. They call him Julian, nephew of Constantine, cousin to the murdered princes, survivor of palace purges, and now the emperor. But there's something different about him. He does not cross himself. He does not speak of the one God. He walks beneath the old temples. He burns incense to Jupiter, you. Realize, for the first time in decades, Rome is ruled by a pagan. They call him apostate, as the one who turned away. But Julian never truly turned. He simply never believed. Raised in secret, hidden from the Christian court, he grew up with Homer, Plato, and the gods of Olympus. Now, with the purple cloak on his shoulders, he wants to bring them back. Not just temples, tradition, not just statues, soul. You watch him quietly restore the rituals of old, the sacrifices, the festivals, the hymns to the sun. But he is not Constantine. He does not persecute Christians, not openly. He simply removes their privileges. He stops the funding. He closes their schools. He bars Christian professors from teaching. And in doing so, he hopes the old gods will return, but they do not. You see the people hesitate. Some still kneel at crosses in private. Others whisper prayers to Christ behind locked doors. Julian may be emperor, but faith is no longer his to command. Still, he presses on. He leads a campaign to the east against Persia. Like Alexander, he dreams of glory, of conquest, of uniting. Old Roman valor with ancient Greek wisdom. You march with him across rivers and deserts. He writes philosophy at night and fights by day. He refuses bodyguards. He eats with the troops. They love him, but love does not stop death. In a skirmish near Ctesiphon, an enemy spear pierces his side. He bleeds out beneath the foreign sky. Eyes to the heavens, some say he whispered, "You have won, Galilean," referring not to a soldier, but to Christ, the God he tried to replace, the faith he tried to silence. And when he dies, no pagan follows him. The temples close, the rituals fade, the old gods vanish like smoke in the wind. And you, watching from the edge of history, know he was the last, the final Roman to worship Jupiter as king, the last emperor to believe Rome could be pagan again. Chapter 20. Theodosius and the Triumph of One Faith. When Rome became Christian. Forever, you've seen emperors rise and fall. You've heard their words, their prayers, to gods old and new. But now, the choice is made. His name is Theodosius. He doesn't ask if Rome should be Christian. He decides that it must be. You watch him ascend in a time of confusion. The East and West are barely holding together. Goths press at the frontiers. Civil wars simmer in every province. Faith divides brother from brother. But Theodosius does not flinch. He is not a philosopher, not a dreamer. He is a soldier king with a bishop's heart, and he brings with him a new certainty. One empire. One emperor, one faith. You hear it in his decrees. Temples to the old gods are shut down. Pagan rituals are banned. Sacrifices outlawed. He doesn't just promote Christianity, he makes it the law. Only Nicene Christianity, the belief in seeing. The Trinity in Christ as fully God is allowed, all others. Arianism, Donatism, anything in between, declared heresy. You see bishops gain power once reserved for generals. You see Christian clergy advising the emperor and rebuking him. One day you witness it, a massacre in Thessalonica, citizens killed under imperial order. The church speaks back. Bishop Ambrose of Milan refuses Theodosius entry into the cathedral. The emperor, supreme ruler of East and West, stands outside weeping, fasting in public penance. For the first time, the church has humbled the throne, and Theodosius submits, not out of weakness but conviction. You feel the tide turn, not with swords this time, but with scripture and sacraments. Rome is no longer just a political body. It is now a Christian empire, through and through. When Theodosius dies, he leaves the empire to his sons. One rules the east, one rules the west. But you know the truth, it is not the empire of Augustus anymore. It is something new. The pagan gods are gone. Their temples crumble. Their names live only in stories. You've witnessed the transformation, from myth to might, from Jupiter to Jesus. Rome has not fallen, but it has been reborn. Chapter 21. Alaric and the Sack of Rome. When the eternal city trembled, you never thought you would see it. The unthinkable, the impossible, Rome, falling, not to Caesars or rivals, not to plagues or fires, but to outsiders. To those once called barbarians, you hear his name before you see him, Alaric, a Goth, a general, a man who once fought for Rome. He knows Roman roads, Roman law, Roman pride. He once wore their armor, spoke their tongue. But now you see him outside, the gates not as an ally, not as a mercenary, but as a king and an enemy. Alaric leads an army of dispossessed Goths who served Rome, bled for Rome, and were betrayed by Rome. They were promised gold, land, food. They were given none. You remember the bitter winters they waited, hungry and ignored. And now, Alaric is done waiting. He demands recognition. He demands justice. The Western Emperor, Honorius, cowers in Ravenna, far from the city he is meant to protect. So Alaric marches on Rome itself, the eternal city, the heart of an empire that once ruled the world. You watch as he surrounds it. The Senate panics, the people starve. Gold and relics are scraped together as a ransom. Alaric takes it and leaves, but not for long. You think it's over, but something deeper has broken. Rome is no longer feared, no longer sacred. When Alaric returns in 410 AD, this time, he doesn't ask. You are there the night the gates open, not from without, but from within. No siege, no thunder, no divine wrath, just betrayal. And silence, then screams. The Goths enter. You expect fire, slaughter, ruin. But this is not the sack you imagined. Churches are spared. Women and children are protected. There is looting, yes. Gold, statues, memory, but not destruction. Alaric is not there to burn Rome. He is there to humble it, to remind the world the empire is not eternal, the gods are not listening, and Rome bleeds like any other city. You stand in the forum watching soldiers carry off what emperors once offered to Jupiter. You hear prayers echo down streets where Caesar once rode. This is not just a sack, it is a symbol, the first time since the Gauls, 8 centuries ago. That foreign boots have touched the sacred stones, and you know, something is ending, not just a city, not just a chapter, but a belief that Rome would never fall. Chapter 22. The fall of the West, Romulus, Augustulus, and the end of an empire. You've stood on battlefields. You've watched emperors rise, gods fall, cities burn, but this feels quiet, not with thunder, not with swords, but with a whisper. This is how the Western Roman Empire ends. Not in Rome, not in glory, but in Ravenna, a marshy town hidden behind fading dignity. The emperor is a boy. His name, Romulus Augustulus. You try not to laugh. Romulus, the mythical founder of Rome, Augustulus, little Augustus, a mocking echo of the first true emperor. He is barely a teenager, a puppet placed on the throne by his father, the general Orestes. He rules nothing. No army, no senate worth fearing, no treasury worth stealing. The Western Empire is already in pieces. Gaul is gone, Britain abandoned, Spain torn, Italy itself barely holds. Barbarian generals hold real power now. Among them is one who rises above the rest, Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain in Roman armor. A soldier of fortune, tired of lies. He marches on Ravenna. You expect resistance, there is none. Orestes is captured and killed. His son, the emperor, is spared. Romulus Augustulus is quietly deposed in 476 AD. No battle, no grand speech, no final stand, just a letter sent to Constantinople to the Eastern Emperor saying, "We no longer need an emperor in the West." And just like that, Rome ends. You stand at the harbor, watching Romulus vanish into exile. A boy with an imperial title, now just a boy again. He will never be heard from in history again. No statues, no coins, no tomb. The city that ruled the world for 1,000 years now belongs to memory, and yet the East still stands. In Constantinople, the emperors still reign. They call themselves Romans. They believe the empire lives on. But you know, the truth, something ancient has died. The Senate no longer matters. The legions are no more. The old dream of a single Rome ruling all is over. You walk the empty streets of the once great city. You touch broken columns. You listen for echoes, and all you hear is silence. Chapter 23. The eastern phoenix, Byzantium, rises from Rome's ashes. You thought the empire had died. You stood in Rome as the West crumbled, as the boy emperor faded into exile, as the eagle standard fell. But then you look east, across the centuries, and you see it still breathing, not in Rome, but in Constantinople, Nova Roma, the new Rome, founded by Constantine, now ruled by emperors who speak Greek but call themselves Romans. This is no mere remnant. This is a living, beating heart, an empire reborn in marble and flame. You walk its walls, taller, stronger than any in the West. You pass beneath golden domes and hear the chanting of monks, not senators. Here, Caesar has become Basilius. Here, Rome has become Byzantium, but they do not see it that way. To them, Rome never fell, only shifted, evolved. You see imperial pageantry blended with orthodox ritual. High court governed by law, intrigue, and divine right. You meet the scholars preserving Greek wisdom, the generals who still march under Roman banners, the emperors who dream not of survival, but of glory. They battle Persians in the east, Slavs in the north, Arab armies from the south. They lose ground, yes, but they endure. You watch as churches rise where temples once stood, as Latin fades but legacy remains, as art and architecture flourish like a new golden dawn. This is Rome transformed, not destroyed. A Christian empire, a Greek-speaking state. A world all its own, and yet its laws echo Justinian, its roads trace Roman stone. Its people still say, "We are Romans." You begin to understand Rome was never just a city. It was an idea, a way of ordering the world, of believing in continuity, even when everything changes. In Constantinople, that idea lives on. For centuries more, not as myth, but as empire, and so you walk its streets. And you no longer mourn the West, because here in Byzantium the phoenix rises. Chapter 24, Justinian the Great, the last emperor who dreamed of Rome. In Tyre you stand once more in Constantinople, but now something has changed. The streets bustle with vision, the palaces hum with ambition, and at the heart of it all stands a man whose gaze stretches beyond the Bosphorus, beyond the east, toward the crumbling west. His name is Justinian. You see it in his eyes. He does not rule a half-empire. He rules Rome, all of it, in his mind, and soon, in reality. He is no soldier, but he commands armies with words and will. He chooses a general, Belisarius, young, brilliant, loyal, and he sends him west to reclaim what was lost. You ride beside Belisarius, you crush the Vandals in North Africa. You march into Sicily, then into Italy. You take Rome, not with legions, but with a handful of men and the weight of destiny. It is not easy. Years of war drag on. Cities fall and rise. The old western lands are not grateful, and they are exhausted. But piece by piece, the map of the empire begins to look Roman again. Back in Constantinople, Justinian is not idle. You walk through the great courts of law. He speaks of order, of justice. He gathers centuries of Roman legislation and reshapes it into something new. Corpus juris civilis, the body of civil law. You watch scholars etch its words into parchment, words that will echo through Europe for 1,000 years. And then the emperor builds. He does not merely restore. He creates wonders. One day you stand before the unfinished dome of a rising basilica. Dust fills the air, marble columns groan under their own weight. Then, at last, the dome is raised, the Hagia Sophia. You step inside and feel the sky curve over you. You have seen temples in Rome, you have walked the marble halls of emperors. But this is divinity made stone. You forget you are on earth, but ambition has its price. The wars have drained the treasury. The people groan under taxes. And then the plague comes. It sweeps through the empire like a shadow. You watch cities go silent, markets empty. Even Justinian himself falls ill. He survives. But something is different. The fire in his eyes dims. When he dies, the world does not rejoice or weep. It exhales. You stand by his tomb. He is not Augustus. He is not Constantine. But he was the last to dream that Rome could be whole again. And for a moment, just a moment, he made it. Through chapter 25. The iconoclasts, when images divided an empire, you enter a church, but the walls are bare. Where once there were golden halos and painted saints, now only stone remains. You look around, confused. There are no faces, no eyes watching from above. Only silence, then you hear it, whispered first, then shouted, "Icons are idols." You have stepped into the age of iconoclasm. The Emperor has spoken. Images of Christ, the Virgin, the saints, they are forbidden. To paint them is heresy, to keep them is treason. You watch soldiers storm monasteries. They smash painted wood, shatter mosaics, burn holy books. You see monks beaten for refusing to yield, and yet, not all obey. In hidden places, you kneel beside scribes who copy sacred icons in the dark, passing them hand to hand like secrets. A mother weeps as the portrait of her patron saint is dragged from her home. A child buries a tiny cross beneath the garden soil. Even within the palace, the court is split. The empress defies the emperor. Bishops argue. Councils convene and dissolve in bitterness. You ask yourself, is this still one faith or something broken into war with itself? Years pass. You hear the cries of the people, "We want our saints back." The policy reverses, then returns, then or reverses again. Generations live and die beneath shifting skies of law and belief. And finally, icons are restored, quietly, slowly, without fanfare. You return to a church and see the old faces again. A gentle Christ, a grieving Mary, a host of watchful saints. But something inside you has changed. You no longer see just images. You see the cost of faith divided. You see an empire tearing at itself, not by sword or invasion, but by belief. And you realize Rome may stand, but even stone can crack from within. Chapter 26, The Schism. When East and West parted ways, you walk the long road between Rome and Constantinople. You carry letters, icons, memories, but more than that, you carry questions. The two great cities of Christendom once stood as one. They prayed to the same God, read the same scriptures, honored the same councils. But something has shifted. You feel it in the language, Greek in the East, Latin in the West. You feel it in the customs. The Eastern Church fasts longer, sings differently, bows where the West kneels. But most of all, you feel it in the pride. The Pi. Bishop of Rome speaks with authority. The Patriarch of Constantinople speaks with independence. And in the middle, you stand, listening to a growing storm. At first, the debates are theological. You hear the Western Church say the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son of Filioque. The East rejects this. You sit through councils, arguments, endless letters. But beneath the doctrine, you see the deeper wound. Who leads the Church? The Pope calls himself supreme, successor of Peter. The Patriarch refuses to submit, equal among equals. The tension sharpens. In 1054, you are there. A delegation from the West arrives in Constantinople. Papers are thrown on the altar of Hagia Sophia. Excommunication. The East responds in kind. And just like that, the Christian world is broken in two. You stand at the threshold of something irreversible. From this day forward, you will walk two roads, one called Catholic, one called Orthodox, two churches, two centers, two hearts, no longer beating together. You look back one last time. Rome and Constantinople still stand. But between them stretches a silence deeper than any war. And, you know, some fractures do not bleed. They echo. Chapter 27, The Crusades. When the West returned east, you hear the thunder of hooves before you see the banners. From across the sea they come. Knights and pilgrims, kings and peasants. Crosses stitched into their tunics, swords gleaming. In the sun. They say they come for Jerusalem, for God, for glory. But soon you see the truth. The West has returned to the East, not to aid, but to claim. You stand in Constantinople and watch as emperors bargain with men they barely trust. The First Crusade brings victories, but not peace. The holy city is taken, yet the blood spilled there, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, clings to the stones. The Crusaders build kingdoms on foreign soil, and you sense it. They fight not only the enemy, but each other. Time passes. Then comes 1204. You, Here the gates of Constantinople fall, not to Turks, not to Persians, but to fellow Christians. You see them pour into the city like fire. They loot churches, tear gold from altars, shatter relics centuries old. A soldier lifts the chalice of Justinian. Another rips down icons, laughing. You hide in shadows and wonder, is this Rome's final betrayal by its own children? The city burns. The Latin Empire is declared, but it is only a ghost wearing imperial robes. You walk through ruins once sacred, libraries gone, icons stolen, the Hagia Sophia desecrated. The East does not forget. The wound will never close, and you realize the Crusades were not just wars of faith. They were the moment when East and West, once broken, became enemies. The dream of one Rome, one church, shattered in the smoke. Chapter 28, The Fall of Constantinople. The last breath of Rome. You stand upon the walls of Constantinople, the same walls that have withstood centuries. Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, Crusaders. But now, you hear a different thunder. Not from the heavens, from cannons. On the horizon, the banners of the Ottoman Empire wave like fire in the wind. Their young Sultan Mehmet II has come with one goal, to end Rome. You feel the city hold its breath, fewer than 8,000 defenders inside, 100,000 soldiers outside, and behind them, the great cannon basilica cast in bronze, loaded with powder, aimed at the heart of history. Day after day, you feel the earth shake, stones crumble, gates splinter. Still, the city holds. You walk the streets at night. You see priests praying, people weeping, soldiers sharpening swords with no illusions. You hear one phrase whispered like a final prayer. Better the Sultan's turban than the Pope's mitre. But you know the truth. There is no salvation coming from the West. On the 29th of May, 1453, the walls break. You are there. The gates fall open. The Janissaries flood in. The defenders are overwhelmed. You run through burning streets. You see the Hagia Sophia, doors thrown wide as people huddle inside, not to fight but to wait. A final mass begins. The priest raises the chalice, and the smoke of incense rises with the sound of screams. The city falls. Rome, the Eastern Rome, is gone. You walk in silence, through ashes, through blood, through the echoes of empire. But as you look back one last time, you feel something. Strange, not despair, not even anger, only awe. For you have walked the 1,000-year road, from myth to marble, from Augustus to Constantine, from glory to ruin, and now you know, even the greatest empires fall. But the story, the idea, lives. On in books, in laws, in cathedrals, and languages and dreams. Rome is gone, but Rome never truly dies. Chapter 29, Legacy. The empire that became the world. You stand among ruins, but your journey is not over. Though the stones of Rome have fallen, its shadow stretches across continents, across centuries. You hear Latin in church hymns, in legal codes, in mottos carved into government halls. You see Roman arches in Paris, in London, in Washington. You trace straight roads across Europe, still following the paths Roman engineers once laid. You walk through courts of law, and there, in the heart of every judgment, you find Justinian's code, the voice of a long-dead emperor echoing. In modern justice, you watch republics rise, and you recognize the Senate. The elections, the citizens speaking as a people. Res Publica. You look at the languages of the West. Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, all daughters of Latin. And then, you open a book, a history, a novel, a constitution. You read of Caesar, of Cicero, of liberty and tyranny. Rome lives on the page. Rome lives in the mind. Even in the east, beneath the minarets of Istanbul, you walk the corridors of the old Byzantine palaces and see that the Ottomans built atop Roman bones. Even in Russia, you hear a new word, Tsar, Caesar. A new throne, a new third Rome. And you realize Rome did not end. It transformed. It became a mirror, a myth, a lesson. To some, it is a warning. To others, an ideal. But to all, it is memory of what power can build, of what pride can destroy, of what remains. When the empire is gone, you close your eyes. You remember the shepherds on the Tiber, the boy raised by wolves, the forum full of voices, the legions marching beneath standards of gold, the basilicas that scraped the sky. And then, silence. But in that silence, you whisper, Roma Aeterna, Rome eternal.